Good morning and welcome to Cyfy 2014, the second edition of a conference that began last year. It was an effort led by Observer Research Foundation. We have the director with us this morning, and FICCI, which is represented by Rajan, but also I see my friend Virat in the audience there. He's a little shy these days, but he's certainly one of the drivers of this particular initiative. My job is to basically acknowledge the support of some of our sponsors and partners. All of you cannot be on the stage, so I'm just going to name a few. Thank you for being here. First is the Kingdom of Netherlands. The Minister Timmerman, who was supposed to join us this morning, has been promoted. He's now going to be in Brussels, so he could not be with us. However, the Cyber Commissioner from Netherlands is going to be speaking tomorrow morning. He's going to be in conversation with Mahima. Ambassador Stollinger, is he with us this morning? But thank you for, is he here? Yes, there you are. Thank you for your support, Ambassador, Marielle and Robert. Microsoft was the other partner who started this whole process with us this year. Aaron, can I see you somewhere? There you are. Aaron and Angela, there you are too. So thank you for your support. We have the British Minister going to be speaking to us. Thank you, sir, for the support of your government and your High Commission in Delhi. Jonathan, thank you very much. And finally, basically, I want to thank our knowledge partners who have contributed in developing the sessions, both from India and overseas. One particularly is the Hague Institute. Richard, can I see you somewhere? There you are, Richard. So we, sir, kicked off the Cyfy this year with a conference in The Hague. The idea was to take some of the Indian dialogue and debate to the European capitals, and the Hague Institute partnered with us. They also provide an academic heft to this program. They sent out a call for papers. 16 bright minds submitted papers. 2 of them are presenting them here at this particular conference, so we are tying in a few streams. We also have a lot of youngsters here today. We have launched an initiative where we are reaching out to the universities in India and getting the youngsters to write about some of the important issues. 5 of the most compelling essays will be published by us, and they will be given a modest honorarium and reward as well. So this basically, Cyfy does 3 things, and the objective mission statement of this initiative is, 1, to familiarize international audiences with the Indian debate on cyber. It is a very loud debate. It is not a monolithic debate. It is not a homogeneous debate. Second, it is to take Indian voices overseas in various forums, in the multi-stakeholder dialogues, in more formal dialogues. And third, it is to provide an academic grounding and foundation for more research-driven analysis and pieces. And that is basically the Cyfy. Without taking any more time, let me first invite Mr. Sanjay Joshi, Director of the Observer Research Foundation, to deliver the opening remarks. Mr. Joshi.
Thank you very much, Samir. Honorable Minister of Communications and IT, Minister of Law, Government of India, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, Government of the United Kingdom, the Honorable Sajid Javed, Sir Matthews, Excellencies, experts assembled from across the world. Welcome to Cyfy 2014, the Indian Conference on All Things Cyber. This is the second year, as Samir mentioned, of this initiative between FICCI and ORF, which has rapidly grown to become India's premier forum on cybersecurity and internet governance. And I'm happy to see in this very room many old faces from last year and many new ones. And we hope to continue this association over the coming years. Now, how does one begin? Yesterday, I had mentioned my first love, Lewis Carroll. 90% of whatever I learned is from Lewis Carroll. I'm also an avid fan of Star Trek. So the remaining 10% comes from Star Trek. You know, in the physical world, in the physical universe, in spite of all the advances made, the world of wormholes and warp speed still remains only science fiction. However, in the digital space, or what many in this world are already describing today as the post-digital universe, in this digital universe, so rapid has been the pace of change that we have already weathered the wormholes, and we are well on the way to attaining far more than warp speed. So rapid has been the pace of change. The problem is that at warp speed, we are experiencing hyper-globalization on an unprecedented scale. We are not only experiencing the heady anticipation and the excitement which comes with this hyper-globalization, but we are also feeling the tremors and the vibrations which are consequent upon globalization at this pace. At warp speed, we are sometimes finding that our governance structures are unable to keep up with the pressures and the stresses that are brought to bear upon the rather rigid and therefore jittery and shaky steel frames which we've been used to, the steel frames of our governance. And the sluggishness of mainframe establishments many times, of societies, of governments, in the face of forms of engagement that are constantly transmuting, changing shape, metamorphosing day by day, which challenge established norms all the time, has meant that collisions and confrontations on multiple fronts, at multiple levels, is only going to become more and more inevitable. Unlike anything in the past, the cyber world has the unique ability to connect people in universal and non-hierarchical modes of engagement. Modes of engagement which are unimaginable in the past. It is the fluidity and amorphousness that traditional structures and systems are unused to handling. And with the tentacles spread far and wide into every corner of our most intimate and personal lives, our financial systems, our security establishments, the virtual world is no longer capable of being brushed aside as a domain of the young rebellious upstart or the deviant outsider. It penetrates everything. And the past years have not only demonstrated the capacity of the cyber world to upset long-standing international equations, but have also confirmed the sheer power of the internet in influencing individuals and collectives. And here we will be talking about data breaches in the cloud, social media wars, state-sponsored hack attacks, you name it. It is all there. And the global community is actively been debating all these issues. The possible regulation required to safeguard citizenry, businesses, institutions. And one of the fiercest debates in the light of the Snowden revelation and the subsequent unearthing of massive government surveillance networks has been on surveillance-based security and its consequence on the basic right of the privacy of the individual. And the interesting thing what this has to teach us about what we are handling today is that in all these David and Goliath battles, it is David which always wins. Beyond that, David in many ways has become the new Goliath. And that is something which we need to confront and face day by day. In today's technology-driven world, so how do we plan to protect our critical information infrastructures against attacks? Questions of whether social media is disruptive, is it democratic, does it lead to new forms of engagement? These are all issues which we will be talking about. I'll not go into details of them because you will be discussing them ad nauseum over the next 2 days. What is the status of international bodies? How do international bodies come in? Where do they step in? It is therefore imperative for the global community to come together to encourage conversations like this and debates on such matters so that we can introduce across the world rational policy initiatives on the same. We all need to learn a lot from each other in this process. The essence is that For all its merits, for all its demerits, virtual reality remains ultimately a mediated reality. And with the explosion of social media, it is better to call it again a hyper-mediated reality. But the very fact that it remains a mediated reality also means that while it empowers the many, it also places unprecedented power in the hands of many of the same old actors, trying and testing each other's wits and skills with far greater power than they had in the past, building newer and stronger coalitions, because what we've placed in their hands is a phenomenal mode of outreach which transcends all boundaries. And because it is a mediated reality, we therefore see and will continue seeing these keen contests on technologies, on laws, on standards, on language, on ownership. So how does one even begin contemplating the framework or regulatory environment that can hope to manage this virtual Tower of Babel? And as many are prepared for that matter to argue, should there be any regulation at all? There would be people who say that, well, in the digital age, anarchy is order, and that is where we should be transitioning. And where does a country like India stand in this? Active internet users in the country number a staggering 325 million. And with the Digital India Initiative, which this government has launched, we hope to leverage the power of technology for governance on a scale unimagined and unimaginable at any other time in history. We hope to connect 1 billion people, to reach out to them and provide tangible social services, health, education, financial inclusion, right up to the last mile, and continue to do it at the lowest price point anywhere in the world. Access to rural credit, crop insurance, loans, small businesses, for scaling up for families and government to respond to special events and calamities. The possibilities are infinite. For financial inclusion, we know, is a definitive building block that can help unleash the collective capabilities of this country. And for all these services, vital as they are to the social obligations of the Indian state, we need the most secure infrastructure, we need the most secure protocols. The digital last mile needs the highest level of security, again at the lowest price points. So these are the imperatives that India's Cyber Quest embodies, and we are going to need for this innovation on a scale unprecedented. And it's these imperatives that demand that the sheer weight of the problem on the digital map also translate into an equal weighty voice for India on the high table amongst the rule makers. It is these challenges comprising of its socio-economic needs and priorities that shape India's strategic vision for cyberspace. The process will not be easy. As I began by saying, we need to accept that at warp speed, we are required to reimagine the notions of sovereignty, of India itself, of how we engage with the hitherto rather facile notions, the categories used to call friends, enemies, and outsiders. These categories are breaking up. Are we going to invent new frames? Are we going to insist that we slow down, which is actually going to be disastrous? Are we going to place structural handicaps that allow the catch-up to happen? That is the core of the debate, the call for action, as well as for the lack of it that confronts us today. Finally, by its very nature, this is no lonely furrow that any country can plow on its own. The paths we find have to be collaborative. Of the billion Indians we hope to connect to the internet, the vast majority will continue to have the competitive choice to do so through platforms owned by multinationals. The hardware for this will continue to be produced through global value chains. Significant investments in the sector and the innovation required to make it all possible will also be driven through partnerships overseas and will fructify only as a consequence of the business opportunities that abound across the world. And there is good reason for letting them all flourish. All this forces rethink on the notions of territoriality, jurisdiction, and stakeholders. The good news is that the new government is engaging with this medium like never before. And therefore, it is indeed a privilege to have with us the Honorable Minister, Shri Ravi Shankar Prasad, to share his views in the inaugural address, which follows shortly. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we hope this to be 2 days of intense learning for all of us, from which both the knowledge and the will be captured for dissemination to all of you and across the world. Thank you all for being part of this process. I wish you all a very comfortable and engaging 2 days.
In my hurry to make sure that the minister catches his flight to Korea, I forgot that we need to welcome them with some bouquets, which I've been reminded of. So Vindu and Abhijit, two of our young scholars, please welcome the two dignitaries with some. We can actually. So we are not going to read out the CVs of our dignitaries. You have them in the book with you. But I was particularly intrigued when I read Minister Javed's biodata. He has been a banker for 20 years. And now he is in government working on a cross-section of issues, culture, information, communications, and media. And it would be extremely interesting to hear his views. So can I request you to deliver the keynote address at this inaugural function? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Sanjoy, thank you very much for your remarks as well. Your very thoughtful remarks, and you made me remember that when I was appointed the Culture Secretary in Britain, the media started to report that I was a Star Trek fan, what they call a Trekkie, and they were wondering whether I enjoyed Star Trek more than Shakespeare. So I think Sanjoy understands the importance of Star Trek. But in any case, it's a real pleasure to be here in India, a country that, as the Communications Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad has recently observed, is at the cusp of an IT revolution. India is a proud nation, a very great nation, and it's a nation that stands to become even greater still thanks to the incredible power of the Internet. The World Wide Web is without doubt the greatest technological success story of the modern world. And just as Britain's inventors powered the worldwide industrial revolution, so it was that the British genius, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who ushered in the global digital age. The ability to get online has completely transformed the way billions of people live, work, and learn. It allows us to build communities across borders, to trade with customers in distant lands, and to instantly share ideas with friends and strangers around the world. These benefits have been felt already by hundreds of millions of Indians. Only China boasts more internet users than India. Prime Minister Modi has used the social media to revolutionize the way politicians here communicate with a vast electorate. And the Digital India Plan is set to change both the face and the profile of India for years to come. Yet, around 80% of Indians are not regular users of the internet. Worldwide, more than 60% of people have never, ever been online, not once. That's 4 billion people who are missing out on the benefits and the opportunities of the web. 4 billion potential customers missing out, for example, on what Indian businesses have to offer. But as we've heard, the situation is already rapidly improving. Internet penetration is growing at a phenomenal rate. The web is becoming even more open to different languages and non-Latin scripts. Every year, the number of users increases by 10% and by an incredible 40% in India. In the past decade alone, almost 2 billion people worldwide have accessed the internet for the very first time. Earlier this month, McKinsey predicted that around 900 million people extra will be online by 2017. But that will only happen if the previous explosive rate of growth continues. And that, in turn, will only happen if the Internet retains its freedom to grow and evolve across national boundaries. And that's why continued collaborative Internet governance is so important. Now, before I go any further, I think I should make it clear what I mean by Internet governance. It's one of those phrases that journalists and politicians have been throwing around a lot recently. It's good, I think, to be exactly clear on what is meant. When I talk about Internet governance, and when the UK government talks about Internet governance, I mean the definition that was agreed at the World Summit on the Information Society. And let me just quote that definition. The development and applications by governments, the private sector and civil society in their respective roles of shared principles, norms, rules, decision-making procedures, and programs that shape the evolution of the Internet. And the way that should be put into practice, I think, is best expressed by the principles that were agreed in Brazil earlier this year at the Global Multi-Stakeholder Meeting on the Future of Internet Governance, or Net Mundial. These principles weren't put together by politicians. They weren't drawn up by bureaucrats at the United Nations or the ITU. They weren't imposed by civil servants in London, in Washington, or in Delhi. They were created in the open by the community that supports and curates the Internet. The people without whom online would simply not have been possible. The people who have the best possible grasp of both the challenges facing the Internet and the means required to tackle them. And the principles themselves are as robust as they are simple. Internet governance should be built on a fully inclusive, multi-stakeholder process, one that ensures the meaningful and accountable participation of everyone involved. Decisions should be made in a bottom-up, open, consensus-driven way. There should be a suitable level of accountability with mechanisms for checks and balances as well as for review and redress. Anyone affected by an Internet governance process should be able to participate in that process. I'm proud to say that the UK government wholeheartedly supports the Net Mundial principles as a basis for the global Internet governance framework, and I'd urge our Indian friends to do the same. After all, what is the alternative? Top-down, centralized decision-making? A bureaucratic World Wide Web full of red tape? Cyberspace divided by firewalls and virtual fences? And the Internet being run not out in the open by the people who make it work, but behind closed doors by horse-trading politicians. Just imagine an Internet that relied on governments agreeing on things. Internet governance has to match the rapid change experienced by the Internet itself. But let's face it, rapid action and intergovernmental agreement are not concepts that generally go together. And a fragmented, locally managed Internet would be bad for business too. India is already a global technology hub with outstanding skills and a base in IT and communications. Companies such as TCS, Wipro, Infosys are world leaders in their fields. These firms and many others besides rely upon a free, unfettered access to a global Internet marketplace to thrive and to trade internationally. If we were to restrict the online world by moving to a model of governance based solely on discussion between governments, we could quickly find ourselves with an Internet that's broken up into regional blocks, an Internet that is no longer truly global. And if that happens, the financial implications for some of India's most dynamic and most successful companies would be very damaging. But I don't want you to think that national governments have no role to play in internet governance. Of course we do. We are one of the multi-stakeholders after all. We have to ensure that the internet does not become an online version of the Wild West, a dangerous place where honest people cannot feel safe and secure. The law must apply online just as it does offline. Governments cannot deliver that by simply throwing up barriers and fragmenting the internet. But working together, we can take a lead in the promotion and delivery of effective cybersecurity. As the global internet economy grows, so do the risks posed by cyber criminals. In the UK, we rank computer-based attacks alongside international terrorism as one of the biggest threats to our national security. It's a problem that must be tackled. If the world is going to fully realize the benefits of the online age, the internet needs to be open yet secure. We need to know that we can communicate and transact safely. That's why in 2011, the UK government published its first cyber security strategy. It supports economic prosperity, protects our national security, and safeguards the public's way of life by building a more trusted and resilient digital environment. The strategy is being delivered with almost £1 billion of government money and is another example of the multi-stakeholder approach in action. For example, there's our Cyber Essentials scheme. Developed by government, industry and academia, Cyber Essentials lets any organization, large or small, British or overseas, demonstrate that they have the key technical controls in place needed to counter the most common online threats. It's a great opportunity for companies around the world to demonstrate to their customers that they take cyber security seriously. With 70 years of experience in information assurance and worldwide reputation for excellence in its field, it's no surprise that the UK's cybersecurity sector is going from strength to strength. It expanded by 22% last year, including £80 million of exports to India. That's the highest growth rate in the global list of 53 economies and means we are on track to hit £2 billion of cybersecurity exports by 2016. Now, once again, this is down to the multi-stakeholder approach. It brings together government, industry, academia, so they can work together in cooperation rather than in competition. And we're more than happy to share the results with the world so that other countries can join the multilateral fight against cybercrime. That's why the UK government was delighted to co-fund this event, giving stakeholders from both of our countries a chance to discuss solutions to the challenges we all face. But you mustn't be lulled into thinking that cybercrime is just about hacking or online fraud. From terrorists to stalkers, an insecure internet is a rich resource for those who seek to do harm to others. Later this year, our Prime Minister David Cameron will be hosting an international summit on tackling the online sexual exploitation of children. It's a great opportunity for world leaders to come together and confront these criminals, and I look forward to India taking part. Now, we must ensure the internet is safe, it is secure, it is successful, but we cannot allow that to be an excuse for further government control of cyberspace. The multi-stakeholder model, both to governance and security, is the single best solution to this challenge. It will allow the internet to survive and to thrive, providing unlimited benefits to countless individuals and businesses. And India is uniquely placed to show the world just how well this approach can work. It is the world's largest democracy, the third largest economy in Asia, home to a rapidly expanding digital community that has a phenomenal potential for future growth. With a new government, a booming private sector, and a vibrant civil society, there's never been a better time for India to embrace the multilateral approach that already serves the internet so well. ICANN's Fadi Chahade has called the internet, and I quote, the greatest public gift. He's absolutely right. It doesn't belong to anyone. It isn't controlled by anyone. The internet itself has endured and expanded precisely because it is bigger than any one country. And there should be no barriers in cyberspace. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. That was a very strong and clear, upfront pitch for something which all of us clearly discuss and debate these days, a more democratic way of managing something that all of us are engaged with. Before we come to the Honorable Minister, Mr. Prasad, I just wanted to share with you that in the late 90s, early 2000s, as India was opening up its telecom sector, the Honorable Minister was clearly one of the key members of the government trying to find ways in which we could engage more people, open houses, engage civil society, engage industry in creating the right regulatory environment. Rajan was also a part of that debate. Virat was also a part of that debate as well. And sir, now you have been again given the role of actually shaping the digital economy as India increases its internet access to the billion that need to be connected. So, sir, your views would be most interesting for all of us here. May I welcome you to deliver the inaugural address.
Honourable Minister from UK, Mr. Sajid Javed, Mr. Sanjay Joshi, my good friend Samir, eminent journalist Ashok Malik, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. Last year, Samir met me. I know the great work Observer Research Foundation is doing in India, giving a positive image of India. And I just asked him, what are the other projects you are doing? And he mentioned about this whole event which they organized last year. And it was very enlightening to know the results of the conclave last year. But I never thought in the wildest of my dream that in the next session I'll become the communication minister and will get the privilege to inaugurate it. Good luck for me. And Sunjay, I'm not going to begin with Shakespeare or any thinker, okay? Because I think it is important to recognize the in-house creativity of the digital world, which is by itself too enormous. Well, friends, yes, thank you, Mr. Minister, for quoting me. When I became the Minister for IT and Communication, I made two comments. I had the privilege and honor to be a minister in the previous India government, headed by the legendary Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, when I handled the law, information broadcasting and coal mines portfolio. I said if Mr. Vajpayee government was known for highway program, the whole national highway program commenced in that regime with great success. Mr. Narendra Modi's government will be known for the information highway. It clicked on. And the second thing I said, India is sitting at the cusp of a big digital revolution. And we have to make it happen. When I became the minister, I asked how many mobiles we have. I was told it is 900 plus million. The internet user, 325 million. In the rural internet user, 72 million has risen to 85 million in June 2014. Our IT sector contributes for 38% of India's services exports. Indians have become highly newsy people, you know. When I was INB minister, I promoted, as Samir rightly pointed out, the opening up of the television sector. We have got 600 to about 1,000 channels in the sky of India. We have got 245 24/7 news channels in India who keep on in different languages, who keep on blaring sense and at times nonsense also, which we have to tolerate in a democracy. This whole FM channel revolution, I had the privilege to be the initiation of the liberalization, and today we have got 275 FM channels in India, besides the All India Radio, whose reach is nearly 99% of India. India, this Google, the Facebook, the smartphones consumption outside USA is perhaps the highest in India. Now, this being the scenario, the foundation was already ready for a digital revolution. Some of you mentioned about my involvement in the Vajpayee government of opening up the mobile telephony. One particular image of how, if you give the platform, Indians learn to use it and at times overuse it, short of abuse. I had a very wonderful experience. I had gone to Chennai and I saw a photograph in a newspaper where a fisherman had gone fishing with his vessel. He was using his mobile to know the rates of the fish in the fish market in Chennai. And the fish which was having good rates, he was keeping in his vessel, and which was not very good, he was throwing it back in the sea. One power of technology he was using. And the second was all the more interesting. We have got a news channel, India News, whose anchor, Mr. Rajat Sharma, is a very popular television anchor of India. And there's a very popular program, Aapki Adalat, where people come, your court. They ask you questions and you have to respond. It is a 1 hour recording program. After that, we were having lunch, after I had become a minister. And Rajat Sharma told a very interesting experience. Whenever he used to return to his home in Greater Kailash from his studio in the night, along with his wife, he found his servant sitting on a motorcycle in front of a particular house and playing with his smartphone. On the third day, he asked him, why the hell he always sits here only? His wife said, very simple, the Wi-Fi connection before that house is the best available. And he uses that to see Brazil football match, World Cup. That's India. Now, Indians are very adept at incorporating technology. And Narendra Modi, our Prime Minister, himself being very tech-savvy, in fact, he went digital in a modest way in 90s itself. And he's one of the most followed political leaders of the world, as you all know it. I need not replicate that. We started certain programs, and I only wish to see how governance challenges are there and how exciting times we are in. We launched a portal, MyGov, where we sought suggestions from the people of India on issues like infanticide, child rights, Ganga cleaning, environmental issues, etc., etc., with concrete suggestions as to what they have done. Within a short span of a fortnight, we got 200,000 suggestions, along with many videos. And there's a dedicated team of the Prime Minister's office interacting with them and also disseminating it to various departments. 15th August is the Independence Day of India. And I asked the folks on this MyGov to design e-greetings for the Prime Minister of India. In a week, they suggested 3,000 designs. We picked up 3, and the Prime Minister of India ended up sending 4 million e-greetings to people of India. We talk of financial inclusion. We decided to launch a program, Jan Dhan Yojana, people's involvement for banking purposes. This name was also given by the people, suggestion. Now, on 27th of September, to be precise, we held 77,000 big and small functions in India. And we ended up opening 14 million accounts on one day. All the people having mobile phone, getting a rupees 5,000 overdraft facility and 100,000 insurance cover. And further, in a week's time, that bank account new being opened for people living below the poverty line has gone to how much? 40 million. Now, if you involve the people, and when they realize the Prime Minister is doing something from them, they also deposited 12 crore will be how much, Samir? 12 crores. 1,200 crores?
1,200 will be
30 million. 20 million in a short span of a month. Therefore, how can we leverage technology? In quest of governance, there is one more issue which we are following. We have got India, which is aspiring India, which is rich India, which is middle class India. We have also a poor India. Children get lost. We thought, how can we leverage technology to locate lost children, And we are going to very soon launch a portal whereby information will be available for lost children. And their portrait photographs will be there. And with the application of technology, we can help their parents to locate their lost children. Hardly a week ago, the legendary Mark Zuckerberg came to meet me. I had a wonderful meeting with him. I asked him, what is your age? He said, 30. When you founded Facebook, I was 19. I put my meeting with him on my Facebook page with a comment, friends, let me share on my Facebook page my meeting with the legendary Mark, the founder of Facebook. And within a short span of 3 hours, I had 700,000 likes on my Facebook. This is a different India. This is a different world. And this Digital India program emerged from there to bridge the divide between rural India and digital India. And the Prime Minister's mandate is very clear that we have to reach every nook and corner of India through broadband and through the best technology possible in the field of IT. The Prime Minister has coined a word. IT plus IT is equal to IT. India's talent plus information technology is India tomorrow. That's what the message he has given, and we have to work on that. The second 3 Ds: democracy, demography, and demand. We have to leverage this 1.25 billion plus capacity of India and Indians in an open space of democracy with the power of demography. India, 65% is 35 and below. 50% is 25 and below. How can we leverage this power? And the third is 3S. Speed, scale, and skill. How can we use all the three? With these larger architecture, the Digital India program has been conceived. And the idea is 3, basically. Digital infrastructure available for all the citizens of India. Government services available on demand. And digital empowerment of Indians. That will lead to, we have got 140% penetration of mobile phone in urban area. In rural it is only 44%. We have to bridge that divide. We have to also ensure proper e-governance. We have to ensure electronic manufacturing in India, which we are lacking. Mr. Minister, you just talked about the situation in England. You know, in India, our understanding is very clear. If Indians are giving the platform, they have a great knack to use it. Young people love new gadgets. But for me, the best trophy of empowered IT India is when an 80-plus granny understands the meaning of missed call. She must respond. She may not be literate. That's the power of India. We wish to reach all the Gram Panchayats of India, the cluster of villages, which is 200,000, 50,000 plus in the coming 3 years. Then we wish to take it to further down with government user network. We also want to involve the private player in detailing, etc., etc. And I see great potential for e-education, e-health, and above all, e-commerce. The aspirational India in the rural side, apart from the urban side, has great potential that we must have access to reasonably good things available which we can afford. And surely, this digital India is also a platform for that. I think, Mr. Minister, you talked about e-governance. Our Prime Minister has given us a mandate. I want to see government available on the mobile phone. It is a very simple sentence, but carries a lot of meaning. Today, we can have our train booking on our mobile, our weather on the mobile, a lot of other informations on the mobile, and how various applications are being used to empower India and Indians. Let me give another example, again of rural India. One of my juniors, when I used to practice, hails from the state of Madhya Pradesh. And she has a taste for all the wheat and the rice and everything, the pulse from her own state. So she gets it from her own grocery shop owner in a rural area of Madhya Pradesh. One day she told me a very exciting experience. She saw on her mobile phone, in WhatsApp form, the receipt of the grains which that petty shopkeeper has booked in a goods train. There was a number of the train, the bogie number, the station in Delhi at which it is going to reach, when it is likely to reach, the receipt for the goods delivered, his bank account as to how the money can be electronically transferred. Now kindly see, a simple shopkeeper in a rural area is now using the power of technology for commerce. There was no training, they were only to polish it. The digital India is basically designed to improve the technological potential of Indians. And in that I see immense potential for expansion of the entire IT architecture in India. Enormous jobs, potential for commerce, potential for appliances, and potential for local and world players to come. When we say, the Prime Minister say, make in India, he only says, make in India, even outsider can make in India, supply in India, and also export outside. Use the finest talent available here. The Prime Minister is very keen, and we are following that. I'm very happy that a lot of improvement is going on. The governance, the certificates, the informations, the public delivery, all should be available online. And people are using it. Farming activity, local educational activity. So this enormous potential is going to be properly channelized in an umbrella program, what we call Digital India, in which we propose to invest $21 billion. That's indeed a very game changer. With this kind of architecture, ladies and gentlemen, surely security becomes important. This is a world which is virtually without boundary. It is a world which is also a lot living in anonymity. anyone can reach anywhere. Mr. Minister, you talked of terrorism. It is indeed a very serious issue. When we talk of cyber security related issue, in the year 2004, we had only 23 incidents. Last year, we had 72,000 incidents. We hear reports as to how cyber attacks are done to completely immobilize the financial infrastructure, immobilize the other information infrastructure. These are challenges. I wish to share something very sensitive with you. Last year, in my own state of Bihar, the Prime Minister, then he was as Chief Minister of Gujarat, was holding a rally. Nearly a million people had come. Some terrorists decided to disrupt it. 80 people were injured and about 8 died. We were sitting on the dais. We could see that bombs are being exploded. We tried to contain the crowd. One of the suicide bombers who had larger designs was caught because while strapping the explosive, it exploded and he died. And his pen drive was confiscated by the police. The security people in my department showed it was in encrypted form, they decrypted it. And I was amazed to find how many photographs were stored which they proposed to target, including 4 photographs of mine. I never knew I was so important. But that's the hard fact. Today, the way, how I see it, Mr. Minister, internet, mobile phone, new media is one of the finest inventions of human mind. It is indeed a game changer. Why should few be allowed to abuse it to destroy humanity? I see it in a larger context and larger perspective. And therefore, cyber security by itself becomes of critical importance. How we see it? Are we ready for it? Are we prepared for it? Are we committed to ensure a proper regime? I would like to highlight some of the issues which are very important to be flagged. Obviously, do we have the technical and legal architecture available to identify the perpetrators and the sources of attack? Do we have any international mechanism for sharing of information and determine action against perpetrators? This unhindered growth of network of infected computers across the world, how do we propose to address this problem? Absence of global cyberspace norms to regulate and guide responsible behavior in cyberspace. There are many, I'm only flagging the few, which must concern us as policymakers. We in India are very clear that we need a proper framework for internet governance, which must be inclusive, which must be democratic. I'm happy, Mr. Minister, to hear very scintillating words from you that the exchange on internet should not have only one particular mindset. It cannot be. If the world is global, global can never become meaningful unless it is linked to the local. That's how I see it. And an internet may be invented by a particular country, but today it is the property of the world. It is the heritage of humanity, powered by diverse innovations from every part of the world. All should be welcomed, all should be made a stakeholder. That is what the approach of Government of India is very clear, as far as the issue of ecosystem is concerned. Now, if internet is owned by the global community, is it not important that we must make collective effort to ensure it is not manipulated, it is not misused? And this is not only terrorism. I remember at one point in time going to an airport, I had to rush to fly out, and suddenly learn to my dismay what happened. The system has failed and everything came to a stop. There was some problem. Suppose some extremist or terrorist try to manipulate the system and ensure that the entire information system of the world itself comes to a grinding halt. What shall be the consequence? Therefore, there is a great imperative need to have a proper ecosystem, proper framework whereby there is meaningful cooperation followed by prompt action under defined norms against those who seek to manipulate the system. It is very important that information is properly shared. And it is equally important that there must be a mechanism for accountability in place in respect of crimes committed in cyberspace, so that internet remains a free space for universal well-being. These are some of the logical, larger issues I would like to flag. Yes, we remain committed. As the Minister, Government of India, let me assure this international gathering today that India is willing to take the extra step as far as the evolution and stabilization of these frameworks are concerned. One last issue I would like to flag, and that is, if internet is the property of the world shared by the human race, if the global has to have a good linkage with the local, it is equally important that local cultures must be reflected on the internet. We recently launched a new portal, Bharat. And I told my people in my department, please ensure that various Indian languages also get equally reflected on the internet. Simple language, Hindi or English or Tamil or Telugu or Malayalam. In a similar way, if the new media, the social media has become such a powerful tool, the issue of privacy is there, other issues which Sunjay has flagged, the Minister has talked about. This whole powerful mechanism, one of the finest invention of human mind, must also give respectful platform to various cultures of the world, be it Asia, be it Latin America, be it Africa, and not only Europe and America. That's how I see it. If that happens, then this whole mechanism, which I say is a game changer, will be really subserving the need of the people of the world and every country. The last take I have to make, I'm sorry I have spoken a little more, I have to rush to the airport to attend an IT conference in South Korea. And what is my last take? There is something we owe to the posterity of the world. And what we owe to the posterity of the world is a safe internet, which is always useful for the people for growth in a constructive way. These are some of the larger views I share. Samir, thank you for giving me the platform and sharing my views with all of you. Thank you. Namaste.
So Rajan, your task is cut out. The Minister has a flight to catch. You have, I think, 5 minutes now, because I had promised to leave him at 12:10. So, thank you.
That's right. Honorable Minister for Communications, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, Member of Parliament and Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Support, Mr. Javeed, the Observer Research Foundation Excellencies, Mr. Saran, Mr. Joshi, distinguished guests and diplomats, international speakers and delegates, friends from the industry, civil society, academia, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to bring to you the final concluding remarks and to say thank you to Your Excellencies and to the Honorable Minister. I think, the Honorable Minister from the UK talked to us about how UK introduced the digital area to us. And Honorable Minister talked about how in India we had expanded the internet. I'd just like to remind the Honorable Minister that the zero was invented in India, and without the zero, you wouldn't have had a digital revolution, sir. So I think we all lay claim to the internet in some form or fashion, but with that, I think I just want to highlight a couple of things. First of all, sir, the bottoms-up approach on the internet. I think the multi-stakeholder approach is something which is near and dear to our hearts, and I think that was reiterated by the Honorable Minister, Mr. Prasad, and I think that is critically important. The great value that India holds and the expansion that the government has with regard to its commitment. We talked about the digital inclusion and digital India, the three ITIs, ITI plus ITI, the three Ds, the three S's, and the Indian government's focus on making sure that this reality exists in the hands of every citizen so that governance and commerce and education and health all become things that are experienced by the common person both in the rural and in the urban areas. So the expansive nature of the internet, and again reminding us from both arenas the necessity for security in this particular context and the importance. I'd just like, sir, to close with three quick points, and I know you have a plane to catch. So the first thing, first of all, is to please remember that the internet has a face. That in our deliberations, we need to remember that there are people behind the joys that we experience on the internet, and there are sorrows in people. And that 80% of the problems that we face on the internet in terms of security are invariably driven by failures of the human intervention or the human involvement. And so I ask that in our deliberations that we remember the human face of what is involved in terms of the security. The second thing, sir, is to please remember from our Indian perspective the vital role that the private sector plays. Over 90% of the networks in India are run by private operators. And to please, in this vision of the multi-stakeholder approach, to please ensure that the private operators and the private investments that are part and parcel of ensuring cybersecurity will continue to be focused on and included, sir. That is the first and critical thing that we would request in terms of this. The second thing, very quickly, sir, is for India to speak with a single voice, sir, we understand, and the nature of the multiple voices we hear, the necessity to speak with a single voice on this. And finally, sir, to be able to ask again that we as a nation, that you've given us this vision and the government to continue to focus on this sense of liberalization that you yourself have introduced. So we want to express our thank you for that and say thank you again for participating in this, and thank you again, Mr. Javeed, for participating in this, and thank you to all of you for being a part and parcel of this, and we welcome you to an extensive deliberation over the next 2 days. Thank you very much.
Now, can I request everyone to remain seated? There will be a small presentation before lunch, but please allow the minister to exit. He has seriously a plane to catch.
You didn't believe me?
And my apologies for the really hurried inaugural session. There were some bilaterals taking place outside which delayed the proceedings, and because of that, I was a little rushed in everything I did. So let me also now take this opportunity to welcome the online viewers who are watching the live streaming of this conference. I had forgotten about you. Many apologies. What we did was that as we were preparing for this conference, we thought, why not poll a certain elite, do an elite survey. We have at ORF roughly 250, 300 visitors coming and discussing various issues on foreign policy in any given month. So we thought, why don't we poll them on what is their opinion on some matters around the internet. It's a very primitive survey, but it has some very nuanced outputs. And we felt that while we will load up the entire survey on our website, and it will be available for you to use both in terms of some of the findings as well as some of the raw data which we will be loading up, we have 19 slides which I will try to finish in the next 10 minutes, just to kind of provoke us into rethinking some of our notions as we move to the next days. The first was, we asked them what is the purpose of the net, and clearly connection and communication, business as well as governmental service seems to be what people believe the IT sector or the internet does for them. This is not surprising, but 75% of the respondents still use internet primarily for communications. Business and governmental services are increasing, and that is what the minister was emphasizing on. Communication still dominates the use of the net. Who owns the net? We heard Rajan mention that 90% of infrastructure investment is by the private sector. However, 40% respondents still believe that government owns the net. And I think this is interesting. And one of the reasons for the foreign audiences and for the participants could be, and this is my conjecture, could be that the landlines which dominate the metros are still sometimes the state-owned companies. They are the ones who rule that particular sector. And that could be reflected in this particular finding, although the mobile telephony is largely privately held. And I think that's probably what is being reflected here. Who is responsible for the stability and security of the net? And here again, yes, there is a huge component of government being the one responsible, but nearly 60% of the respondents believe a multi-stakeholder model has to be the option as we respond to some of the challenges of the net. Now again, I want to clarify, this is a Delhi-centric survey. This is an elite survey of those who interact with foreign policy and security policy issues. So clearly this does not reflect the 700 million Indians who reside in different parts of the country, in the rural countryside and other metros, etc. But this is something that tickled me. So multi-stakeholderism is alive as far as the Indian debate on securing and keeping the net stable is concerned. Do you want greater regulation of the net? And guess what? Yes, people want greater regulation of the net. And when we ask them who should frame the regulations, again, it is an even Steven between government-driven regulations and a more participatory process for regulating the internet. But it's clearly an even result. Then we ask them, is freedom of speech absolute or freedom of expression absolute? And again, 56% said, no, it is not absolute. So I think that the American end of the spectrum on FOE versus the Indian acceptance of a more moderated FOE is something that needs to be navigated as we decide what to do with the internet. This is a realist position that we all have to appreciate. We can't universalize how we deal with certain issues. Has FOE been enhanced by the net? Yes, it has. That was not a surprise. Except that I liked that 1% of the respondents did ask me what is freedom of expression. Then we asked them, have you heard of section 66A? 66A, now since the minister has left, I can be a little more frank with you. 66A is a section in the IT Act that some believe tends to make the constitutional provisions even more strict, more restrictive in terms of the free speech. And there are a few cases that are being fought, and I think we will hear about it in the next panel after lunch. But 67% had heard of this section, and only 25% believed that it was consistent with the constitutional position, which means the largest chunk of the population does believe it is perhaps in contradiction of what the constitutional provision is. And yet I don't see a very loud debate on this issue. A country which is so fond of debating everything has still not decided that there is some issue that needs to be debated. Then we asked them, can companies access your data if you use their services? 85% said yes. So, I keep telling people that you meet an Indian, they will ask you about your grandmother, about her illness, about who she married. The whole concept of sharing data, sharing information is very different. It's not the European impulse of hiding everything even from yourself. We are a little more expressive about ourselves. Do you think right to be forgotten should be formalized in India? And there was surprisingly another Indian contradiction, a large chunk saying, yes, we want it to be formalized. Obviously, a large chunk also doesn't know what right to forgotten means. So even in the elite group, a large chunk is not engaging with this particular conversation. So is right to forget again against the nature of the internet, where access to information and the fluidity of the medium is something that is a key feature? Again, a large part said yes. So this is again an Indian contradiction. They want to be forgotten, but they know that this is the key feature of the internet. So have you been a victim of cybercrime? A large chunk of the respondents believe they have been. Have you used pirated software or downloaded illegal content? 43% lied. So So I think that is important. I have not used. So what is India's biggest cybersecurity threat? Evenly divided. Terrorism is clearly a key concern, as you can see here. And US surveillance is not that dominant. That's why people in the West wonder, why is it that you were so muted in your response to the revelations? I think that is it. We feel safe when the US surveys us. Chinese hacking is a concern. Non-state actors and cybercrime clearly but it's fairly evenly balanced. Do you know about India's e-surveillance program? Now, this is interesting. This is a very interesting table. Nearly 55% support the Indian e-surveillance program. Less than 20% believe that this should not be there. And this is also an interesting take from the respondents. Many of them know it is there. Many of them say it is not there and it should be there. Many of them have given a bland answer. But the largest part of the respondents are supportive of a surveillance program and are aware of it. And that's an interesting finding. Career opportunities we spoke about. Yes, they believe this is a great sector. It keeps people like me and Mahima employed, so we also support it. Who should speak for India on governance and security policy? Something that was discussed by both the ministers in their inaugural address. And clearly, again, you could see, I find two messages important here. One, the government is still important. A multi-stakeholder platform is clearly the dominant outcome, but the lack of trust in the private sector is also glaring. And this, when you see the entire survey, private sector as an interlocutor for policy is still not trusted in India. And I think that is probably to do with the last 7-8 years of bad branding for the corporate, and this might change over time. But this is something to watch out for. What we will be doing is we will be updating the survey every year to see how the debate moves. We'll be making it more nuanced, more complex, but we will be revisiting some of these questions again and see what the timelines show us. On internet governance, who should India partner with? This is for me, India. This particular graph describes India to you. EU, yeah, you can understand. Russia, no. China, no. BRICS, the maximum. BRICS doesn't have Russia and China in it. Yeah, so this is for me a classic Indian outcome. You don't want to partner with Russia, you don't want to partner with China, but BRICS gets the maximum number of votes. USA and EU, fine, but BRICS is the way to go. Brazil does it for us, yeah. So then we ask them which of these platforms is appropriate for managing the commons. And this is very interesting. It's equally divided between multilateral forums like the GGE and the ITU and the multi-stakeholder forum. But ICANN again seems to suffer from any lack of support. And this could be one of three things. One, its credibility, because of its very tight ownership structure that will, and my friend Quek will be participating in ICANN or I Can't, which is a panel later in the evening. Two, I think it's an outreach issue where ICANN has not really engaged with the Indian audiences and they need to ramp up their communications. Or three, that genuinely they believe that the process of transition is not what it seems, and there is an issue around the whole process itself. But this is an interesting finding as well, that while there is support for multi-stakeholderism, there is not commensurate support for ICANN. And I think that's something that needs to be watched out for.